Hi, this is Aaron from Sibling Rivalry, and today we're going to be making mead.
Martini, shaken not stirred.
In modern times, mead is actually associated a lot of times with Scandinavian cultures like Vikings and the Norse, but there's actually historical evidence of mead being created all over the world independently of any outside interference. So there's no intermingling of these cultures. The mead that we're going to be making today is really simple. Normally with mead, you would use fruit, honey, and whatever flavor extracts or spices you want to use with it, but we're going to do something even simpler and just use some cordial and some fruit syrups and some honey that you can find at your local bulk store and some bread maker's yeast. So it's going to be super simple. When you're making mead, the most complicated part really is having a vessel, in this case a carboy, and some form of an airlock, which I'm using a brewing airlock, but what you can actually use if you don't have one of these at home, and if you don't have a glass carboy, you can use a plastic water bottle and a balloon, and you just poke a small hole in the balloon, and that will work as an airlock. So I'm going to get started with making this mead. First, I'm going to pour some water into our vessel here, and I'm just using tap water. Ideally, you'd want to use spring water or something that's been purified, but in our case, we just figured we'd use tap water. As long as your tap water is drinkable and tastes okay, it should be perfectly fine for making mead. So we're making about a gallon of mead here. So you're going to want just under a gallon of water. You can always use less water, but if you're using a glass carboy like I am, there's actually a fill line, which we're going to try and get as close to as possible. And I know, real exciting cinematography here. So through the magic of modern cinema, I refilled this with my mind. And this is actually a spill-proof container, which some of you might get why that needs to be spill-proof. All right, so we're just going to keep filling this. Now with your vessel, it's something that you want to keep in mind is you want to sanitize it. So you can use soap or specialty cleaners for brewing, but what you want to do is after you clean it, you want to rinse it out as best as you can to remove any pollutants, because they can actually affect the fermentation process. So we are just about at that fill line. I think we'll have just under the 1 gallon that it suggests. You might be able to see that there. There's actually some raised lettering on there. That's actually the fill line. So we'll set this off to the side. And now that we've got the water in here, we're going to start adding other ingredients. So we'll start out with the honey, because this is going to be the slowest and most boring thing. So you just want to make sure that your honey is nice and fluid. If it's crystallized, you can always just heat it up by suspending the container in some water, some hot water ideally. And yep, classy noises. And it's important that the water that you use, which is something I should have mentioned earlier, it's important that the water that you use is tepid. So you want to make sure it's about room temperature, not too hot, not too cold. You can get into the science of this and have it a certain temperature and everything, but we're just kind of playing it by ear. So I'm going to try taking the lid off of this, because it seems to be, it has one of those little diaphragms in there, and that seems to be clogging up. Yep, that's what's going on. So I'm going to set this aside here so it doesn't spill on the table. Eat some honey. And So the cool thing about fermentation is essentially just by using yeast, water, and some sort of sugar, in this case honey, which is unpasteurized, the yeast converts the sugars directly into carbon dioxide and alcohol. So you can really do this with almost anything. There's actually a Finnish version of mead that just uses granulated sugar to make literally just pure alcohol. Alright, so I got a spoon now. I'm going to just start scooping this in as delicately as possible. So with this, you want to put about a cup of honey per 1 gallon of water. You can do a little bit more, a little bit less. The more that you do, it actually creates a drier alcohol, which is, I always found kind of interesting. It seems counterintuitive. You'd think sweeter would be less dry, but I guess it's part of the way that the fermentation works. So I think we're at about a cup there. Yep, used about half the bottle, so that's about a cup. I'm just gonna put the lid back on, set this off to the side. And if you're doing this the same way that we are here, you want to make sure any syrups or anything that you add have no preservatives in them. So in this case, this lime cordial has water, sugar, concentrated lime juice, citric acid, natural flavor. Oh, it has sulfites. I guess I can't use it. So I missed that earlier. It actually turns out that a lot of these SodaStream flavors are just pure natural flavor. So there's no sulfites or anything in there, so you can add some of that. And this is just kind of to taste, so to speak. Obviously you're not going to taste it immediately, but we're going to just put in probably about an ounce or two. Close this up so that we're adding orange syrup. We're going to add some raspberry. If I can open the bottle. A few ounces. And some of this grapefruit that we used in one of our other videos that you can check out on the channel. That's really strong. There we go. All right. Now we just have to pitch the yeast. So we're going to use a teaspoon of yeast. Dry activated is fine. You can also get brewing yeast, champagne yeast, and all that other good stuff. But I'm just going to go roughly 1 teaspoon, and we're going to pitch that in there. And there we go. And we're actually going to set this up and invert it to mix the ingredients. So I'm just going to take the airlock out of this so that I've got a smaller hole and use that to plug. And just rotary agitation, just kind of swirl it. You'll notice the colors start to homogenize and mix together. And that's a good sign. And you can keep doing this for a few minutes. So I'm going to be setting up the airlock, and essentially the way that this works, there's a fill line on there. Let's see if I can get that up close enough. There's a little fill line, and you want to fill it up so that the water is even on both sides of these 2 canisters. And what this does is it allows the CO2 to come out this way, and there's actually a small lip on this red cap, but the water keeps oxygen from coming in, which can turn the fermentation bad. So I'm gonna take this water over here. I just need to put just a little bit in this. I'm probably gonna spill a bit of water, but I'll set a cloth down so that I don't spill too much. Or when I spill it, it doesn't get everywhere. So, there we go. Managed to do that without spilling. And now I'm gonna hold this up to the camera so that you guys can see that. We've got equilibrium in the two canisters, and that means that it's gonna work like a dream. All right, and now we just put that into the rubber stopper. Make sure it's airtight here. And when you do that, you're actually gonna see the pressure push the air this way, push the water down, and then push this one up. So it's not gonna be completely level, but that's fine. It's not gonna hurt it. You just want it to be as close to level as possible when you get it in there. And all right, you're set up to ferment. So fermentation takes about 2 to 4 weeks. And during that process, you can add in different flavors and additives like dry fruit. And we'll be back in 2 weeks and touch base with you then.
Day 4. So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting and they had to hire a new one.
Today is yesterday's tomorrow, and that means that we are back from the past and we're going to be doing bottling. So, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, you can see that you can see that it's not fermenting anymore. So it's kind of at a standstill in that regard. So we're just going to take the airlock off. Pressure will equalize. We're actually going to do a quick taste. So I added some apple slices and some cinnamon to kind of try and give this a bit of a flavor about 4 weeks in. We tested it around 4 weeks in using a similar method to what I'm going to show you now, and we actually ended up leaving it for an additional 3 weeks or so and repositioned it into a better area for the fermentation. So you want to make sure it doesn't get cold and doesn't get too warm, so we put it in like a nice kind of equilibrium area in our apartment. So if you're wondering why I have a straw in my hand, I'm actually going to explain that right now. So normally you would use a hose or something to siphon out a bit of the brew, whatever you're fermenting. In this case, I don't have that with me because it's all in storage. So I'm going to be using a straw as a makeshift sort of siphon so that we can load some mead into this cup and I can taste it, make sure everything tastes okay and that I haven't just wasted 6 weeks of my life. So we're just going to lower this in, make sure your thumb's not on there. You want it to go in to the tube. You put your thumb over, pull it out, and then you do that, and there you go. You got some mead. You can do this a few times. Just make sure you don't contaminate anything. I'm sure some homebrew expert out there is screaming at me right now. It smells like alcohol. Okay, that should be enough to get a bit of a taste there. So I'll set this off to the side here. And we'll wipe up that in a bit. And there's some floaties in here because it's not filtered yet, but that's not going to be a problem. It's just some of the cinnamon. Ideally, if you're doing this, you'd want to use fresh cinnamon, like cinnamon sticks or something like that. We just used powdered cinnamon that we had on hand. It should have the same effect, but you'll usually get a better result with a fresher ingredient. So here we go. It tastes kind of like cider, like a cinnamon cider almost. So it's not as sugary as like a cinnamon cider would be because a lot of that's gone into the fermentation, a lot of the sugar's been eaten by the yeast and turned into alcohol. So yeah, we're actually going to be introducing some more sugar into the mix a little later on, but for now we are good to start with the bottling. So I'm going to set this off to the side, put this in there so we don't spill anything, organize my workspace a little bit, and yeah, let's just get some stuff moving. So we are going to be using a funnel, these cool lever top bottles that I found at our local dollar store that have a rubber gasket for a seal on them. They should be perfectly fine for the bottling process. And some cheesecloth that you've probably seen us use in previous videos. And we are going to use the cheesecloth as a filter for this funnel so that we can just pour directly into the bottle. And with these bottles, when you buy them from a store, you want to make sure that you sanitize as best as you can. So I used some hot water and some sanitizer. You can buy specialty sanitizer. I know some people have had luck with using like palm olive soaps and stuff like that. You just, when you use the soap or anything like that, you want to make sure you rinse the soap out as well. So you're rinsing out contaminants initially, and then you're rinsing out whatever you use to clean. So let's get started here. This is going to be interesting. Probably could have used like an extra 5 hands. And there you go. You can see it going through. It's pretty clear actually at this point. And we're probably going to be gifting this to some family members. And you want to give a bit of air space in here because you're going to be generating some CO2 for the carbonation process for bottling. So I'm going to set this off to the side. Actually, I'll set it in the next bottle. Get started with that. Set this one off to the side actually before I get too far ahead of myself and then have to go and do backtracking. So yeah, it's got a nice smell coming off of it. It's alcohol. It's essentially fermented, so it's musky, but I think it's pretty good. Got an apple slice trying to come out. Get back in there. Get back in your hole. And yeah, ideally this would be done with a siphon, but as I said, I don't have a siphon hose on me. So pouring is fine. You're not going to get as good of a thing as you would otherwise. This one's coming through a little cloudier. So we'll switch this cheesecloth further down. You get a cleaner filter, so to speak. And yeah, you could always like double and triple filter this stuff. Part of why we're seeing this one being clearer is it was at the top of the bottle, so it's not mixing up. As you pour, it kind of agitates the yeast and the, I'm trying to think of what the actual technical term is, but there's all the stuff that kind of settles to the bottom. So yeah, it's like a type of silt. There's an actual technical term for it, but effectively it's silt. So let's do this again. We'll probably do another video of this sort of thing in the future with a little more precision. This was just kind of like a test and to show you guys what you can do with the bare minimum. So we'll probably do like a more professional style beer or something in the future. But yeah, there's that. And we'll do this guy. Okay. Super exciting stuff here. And I'm realizing that I don't have enough for 4 bottles. So it'll be like 2.5 bottles. I can probably even it out a little bit using the funnel, but I'm not too worried. And it gets more draggy the further on we go in the process. So you can always filter it out again later if you want. But there we go. Ooh, thumb. All right, so that covers the initial part there. Let's wipe this up. Just slowly spilling everything everywhere. That's just life. Okie dokie. So, actually, let's try and balance this out. So, I can tell I'm getting ahead of myself, getting excited. We will take this guy and we'll pour some of him into this one. Okay, let's do this a better way. There, that should be good. Yeah, that should be good. Okay, I'm gonna have to wipe everything up afterwards, but yeah. And now we're going to add a bit of sugar to each bottle. And this is going to take whatever's left of the yeast and produce CO2. It's going to produce a small amount of alcohol with it as well, but the amount of alcohol that will increase in this overall is negligible. So it's just going to kind of carbonate everything because you're going to seal these off. So I'm just doing about a teaspoon of sugar in each one, and of course, because the funnel's wet, it's sticking in the funnel. So, there we go. You could agitate this if you want to kind of mix it. You don't want to shake, but you could agitate a little bit to get a better mix. And here we go. Okie doke. One really pretty bottle of mead and then 3 kind of scuzzy looking ones. Okie dokie. But like it being cloudy, I imagine someone's probably like, oh, that looks really gross. I don't want to drink that. It actually doesn't affect the flavor whatsoever. Because anything that's in there is dead. So it's not going to like bother you. It's not going to be extra yeast or anything like that. It's all dead yeast for the most part. Once you've done this bottling process, it essentially kills off the rest of the yeast. You could also heat up this and it would kill off whatever's left in it. Just run it at a low heat. It kills off the yeast and then do that. But we're just doing this as simple as can be done. So there you go. You got 4 bottles of mead, traditional something. It's not like traditional mead in any sense, but it's mead. And yeah, let's just agitate. Or actually, I'll see if I can show you the bottom of this bottle here, because you can actually see the sugar building up in there. It's kind of funky looking. And yeah, if you can't see it, you can't see it. Well, you'll see it if you're doing this at home. So we're going to agitate. Try to shake it as little as possible. Just kind of mix the sugar in, and it'll dissolve and make the happy, happy CO2, the burpee juice. Do that with these guys. Someone outside has a very loud car. Don't know if you can hear that on the audio. Just mix a little bit. And there we go. There's that. And the funky juice. The funky juice. All right. So that pretty much is it. You want to let these sit for about 1 to 2 weeks, and they will have carbonated themselves effectively. If you notice that there's a hissing sound coming from them, like you want to store these in a dark place, relatively speaking, while they're doing that last little bit of carbonation. But if you notice there's a hissing sound coming from the seals, you can just kind of loosen off the seals a little bit and just let it off gas a little bit and then close it up again, because it could potentially, depending on how much yeast is left over, it varies from batch to batch unless you're using like scientific measurement and whatnot, like measuring this stuff specifically. If you don't off gas and it's making like a really loud hissing noise, you could end up with exploding bottles. But you probably won't experience that. I've never experienced it in my life. I've only had one bottle that kind of hissed a little bit. I off-gassed it once and it was good after that. So yeah, these should be good. Because these are clear bottles that I'm using, we're going to want to keep these in a spot without any heavy light, any like heavy UV light, even after the bottling's been done. So that'll be a little challenging because we're surrounded by grow lights in here for all the plants that you can see around me. But yeah, we'll find a spot. And you can always, once the you throw them in a cupboard to ferment, or not to ferment, but to do the bottling. And then after that, you could just throw them in the fridge and just have them cool, and they'll last longer. And yeah, that about covers it. I hope that you liked the video. If you did, please give us a thumbs up. We really appreciate it. If you're not subscribed, we really would appreciate your subscription. And normally I have a bell around here, but I can't seem to find it. So make sure you ring that bell for notifications if you are subscribed, so that you don't miss out on our super exciting updates. We're doing an advent calendar right now, and we will be doing regular posts on Mondays and bonus content on Thursdays. I hope you have a great day, and thanks for watching.